We're back in Rocky Mountain National Park for another week of day hikes. This was in October 2020, just a couple of weeks before significant wildfires. Right now, large areas of the park are still closed because of fire damage, and we hope some of those will be reopening later this year. We started the week with a hike to Andrews Glacier, a hike we'd tried twice before but always had to turn back for some reason. You can start this hike at the Glacier Gorge trailhead, or if you're like us and didn't get up quite early enough to get a parking space there, at the Bear Lake trailhead and hike an extra half-mile each way. The first couple of miles of this hike is very familiar for us because it's shared by a bunch of destinations. If you're going to Alberta Falls, Sky Pond, Mills Lake, or the Boulder Brook Trail, this is how you start. As a result, this stretch is pretty busy in the late morning and afternoon, but not this early in the morning. So we tried to make good time through this section, knowing we had a long way to go and it's more strenuous at the end. We stopped for a few minutes at the lock, which is one of my favorite spots in the park. One day, I'm going to be at the lock on a completely calm day with no wind, but it hasn't happened yet. The trail goes around and past the lock, like if you were going to Sky Pond, but then you split off to the right for the trail to Andrews Glacier. It's easy to miss the turnoff, even with a sign, so it's good to have an offline map for your phone so you know exactly where it is.
Really hard to read.
After a little while, you get out of the forest and onto the rocks. This is about the point where we had to turn back last July because there was enough snow that we couldn't see where the trail was, and we knew there were rocks everywhere. Eventually, it's no longer a dirt trail through the rocks, and you're just walking uphill through the rocks. Follow the cairns, the little piles of rocks, and you can make out a path. It gets a lot steeper toward the end, and I didn't film that part because I needed to use my hands to grab onto the rocks to pull myself up. Nothing really technical, but you do need to use a hand or two now and then. Finally, on our third attempt, we made it all the way to Andrews Glacier.
We did it!
We did it! Yay! It was hard!
The next day, we decided to do an easier hike. We're headed to Jim Lake, starting out at the Lumpy Ridge Trailhead. This hike is pretty short, so we took a little detour to see the twin owls. You can see these from in town, too. You just have to be at the right angle, otherwise it just looks like rocks. See? Sort of looks like two owls. This trail has some nice views of Estes Park, since the Lumpy Ridge Trailhead is practically in town. If you have more time, this trail is a big 11-mile loop. We've done that before, but today we're just headed out and back to Jim Lake. I had forgotten just how much walking up stair-step rocks there was, but eventually we made it up to the lake. If you've never seen Jim Lake before, it's not quite like the other lakes in the park. This is a small, shallow pond, and there are no streams feeding it. All the water in the lake comes from rain and snowmelt. This is a good hike when you don't have a lot of time, and the Lumpy Ridge Trailhead is rarely crowded. Next, we're trying something a little different for us that we saw on another YouTube channel. We're going to hike out to Black Lake, where the trail ends, then continue on and try to see some other lakes that you can only get to off-trail. This trail starts the same as our day one hike, past Alberta Falls. Before the lock, though, you fork off to the left. And not long after that, you get to Mills Lake, which is a pretty big lake and, in my opinion, an underappreciated destination. Past Mills Lake, you've got a good bit of elevation gain before you finally reach Black Lake. And this is where the official trail ends. But if you go left around the lake a little bit, there's a very easy to see trail leading up above the lake. Basically, you're climbing up out of Glacier Gorge. Once you get up onto the shelf above, it's amazing. This might be my new favorite place in the entire park. We wandered around for a bit, but ended up not going to any of the off-trail lakes we set out for, just because it already took us about 3 hours to get this far. That may not sound like too long to you, but my idea of a day hike has me back in town early to mid-afternoon for tacos and beer. I would definitely do this hike again and get up earlier so I could have more time out here and make it to some of those other lakes. Next, we're trying some more off-trail destinations that we read about, this time in the Bear Lake area. We headed up toward Odessa Lake to see Lake Helene, which is just off-trail. But along the way, we're headed to Joe Mills Mountain. There's no official trail, but we read that you can get to it from the Sourdough Backcountry campsite. This was right on our way, so we thought we'd have a look. What I read was that you could just walk out the back of the campsite and basically walk up to the top of the mountain. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, after not very long at all, we ran out of trail, or cairns, and this became no fun. So back to the trail. We'd hiked this trail to Odessa Lake a few times before, and I'd never noticed right here where this unofficial side trail splits off. That's the path to Two Rivers Lake. It only takes a few minutes to get down there, but because the forest is so thick, you can't see the lake from the main trail. Two Rivers Lake isn't even on the map you get from the Park Service, so you're probably going to be the only person there. Back on the Odessa Lake Trail, we're getting pretty close to Lake Helene. And once again, I had never noticed this pretty clear path off to the left, which leads down to the lake. Around Lake Helene, there are some really nice views and plenty of places to explore, even a waterfall that we couldn't quite find. This place is a hidden gem. We don't do a lot of summits, but next we're going to the top of Estes Cone, which is about 11,000 feet. That's Estes Cone in the foreground, with the much taller Longs Peak in the background. We are not going there. This hike is a moderate uphill effort until you get to the turnoff for Estes Cone. It's only 0.7 miles from here, but that's misleading because now it gets pretty steep. After a while, you're just climbing through rocks, using the cairns to know where to go. After many switchbacks, we reach the rocky top of Estes Cone. There are some really nice views up here. Technically, this is the top, but I'm not going to climb up there. This is good enough for me. Next, we're headed to another summit, Lookout Mountain, about 10,700 feet. To get to this trailhead, head south on Highway 7 and turn at the tiny town of Meeker Park. The trailhead is about a mile down the residential road. This is an official trail and it's in the national park, but it's not on the Park Service map, so most tourists have no idea it's here. It's a lot of climbing through the forest for most of this trail. When you get close to the top, the trees thin out and you can get some nice views all around. It's a pretty easy hike to the top. There's no exposure, and then it flattens out near the summit.
Summit!
You can see Twin Sisters to the northeast and Mount Meeker off to the northwest. Technically, the summit is at the top of this rock, but you can guess how I feel about that.
I am not climbing this. We're gonna call this good enough.
On our last day, we thought we'd try another off-trail destination. From the Fern Lake trailhead, we'd hike out to Spruce Lake where the trail ends, and from there, continue on to Loomis Lake. We started out before sunrise, and we needed to use our headlamps. We only needed them for maybe the first 10 minutes of the hike, though. Fern Lake Trail ended up having the most fall color of anything we had hiked this whole week. We were making great time, and then, not far past the pool, this huge elk was on the trail. So we had to wait probably 15 minutes for him to finish eating and move on. He was in no hurry. Farther down the trail, when you're almost to Fern Lake, there's a turnoff for Spruce Lake. It says unimproved trail on the sign, but it seemed like a normal maintained trail to me. We made it to Spruce Lake and stopped for a snack, but we've still got more hiking to do, so we're quickly off to Loomis Lake. It's somewhere over that hill. Now we're past the end of the official trail, and here it's pretty easy to follow, so I thought this might be simple. But that runs out pretty quickly, and then you just have to get up the hill through the trees. Eventually we did it, slowly, and we made it to Primrose Pond. Unfortunately, that's as far as we got. We couldn't find our way through the thick forest to Loomis Lake, and after wandering around in every direction for a while, we called it off. But I'll be back to try this again someday after studying other people's paths on Strava. And after a week of hikes, we were out of time and had to head back home. But this trip definitely left us with some ideas for next time.